Hi everyone, good afternoon. I believe we can start now. We have quite some number of attendees and I believe we're expecting some more people, but for the sake of keeping on time, we will start and in hope that everybody will join us during the presentation. My name is Bojana Panevska and I'm an advisor for Dutch Culture. Dutch Culture is an organization and network for international cooperation. And I work for Trans Artists, which maybe you know, it's a platform for artists in residencies from all around the world. I am really happy to start this first webinar in a series of 5 that we have planned throughout this year to introduce all of you to i-Portunus, the fund for creative professionals and artists. And it's really my pleasure to introduce Fanny Roland from Institut Français, who will be the first one who will share more information about i-Portunus and i-Portunus from the first open call in 2019. And then we have Alan Kierans from Goethe Institute Brussels, who is actually the project coordinator of the current i-Portunus funding scheme. We will have opportunity to ask questions. Please, for that, use the Q&A section in the Zoom that is in front of you. And I think it's important to mention as well that we are streaming live on Facebook. So if there are some questions from there, considering the time, we will be able to cover and answer as many as possible. So without further ado, I will give the word to Fanny Roland to introduce the whole project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bojana. I'm very happy to share with you this online webinar today. So hi everyone, I'm Fanny Roland. I'm in charge of the residency department at the Institut Français. I'm based in Paris. And the Institut Français, together with the Goethe Institute, Izolacja in Ukraine, and the Nidart colony in Lithuania, was part of the first edition of i-Portunus. And this first edition was selected and funded by the Creative Europe program of the EU. So that's why it was really important for us to share during this online webinar the first results of the first experimentation of i-Portunus. So I propose first to present the first phase of i-Portunus and the results, and then I will just introduce i-Portunus number 2 and leave the floor to Alan, who will give you more details on the current open calls. So I think we can go to the second slide and then maybe even the next one. So a few words about the context. So at the consortium, our job was to formulate recommendations for the Commission and the Member States to prepare an instrument dedicated to the mobility of artists and cultural professionals in the new European programs from 2021. We had to develop a European mobility scheme which has to target individual artists and culture professionals with self-initiated projects, fostering international collaboration, new professional opportunities, and dialogue. So maybe we can go to the, yeah, thank you. We decided for this project, we have decided to work in 3 steps. First, we have worked together with On the Move for an operational study. And the objective was to define mobility and also to study the existing schemes of mobility in different countries, because the objective of the project was also to to implement a scheme who could be complementary to the existing ones. So this was the first part of the project. Then the second step was the experimentation. So between April and December 2019, we have published 3 calls for application, and we have decided to work in 2 sectors, performing and visual arts. And then the last part of the project was the recommendation. So for this, we have first realized a workshop with many artists and different cultural organizations, and we have asked them for feedback regarding this first experimentation. And then we have drafted with our partners a recommendation for this for the implementation of a sustainable program until 2027. So I would like to share with you some results of this first experiment. So we were able to support 337 artists all over Europe. So for an amount, we have spent more than 600,000 grants, which were awarded. We are very proud to say that we have managed to work with 100% of the Creative Europe countries who were represented in all the application. And then for the laureates, among the laureates, 75% were artists and 25 were culture professionals. And finally, we have noticed that 70% of the laureates are considered as emerging artists, and 30% were confirmed artists. So then, after these results, or based on these results, we have tried to work on recommendations. We have worked on different issues. So we have just here in the slide, you can see 3 of them: geographical balance, environmental responsibility, and we have worked also on the question of eligibility and duration of mobility. And so based on these results, we have we've done this new proposal for i-Portunus number 2. And I just would like to insist on this question of geographical balance. So with this new scheme now, for this new for this i-Portunus number 2, this webinar, for example, is part of our objective to reach all the European countries, all the artists and all the culture professionals in all the European countries. So we are trying to do, or we plan to do, different workshops and webinars so that everyone can have access to the information. And last slide, it's just an introduction of the i-Portunus number 2. So we have decided to work on different sectors because it's also an experimentation. We are not it's not the definitive program, and so it's also limited in the time. So we have decided to work on music, literary translation, architecture, and cultural heritage. And the objectives of mobilities are international collaboration, professional development, and also production-oriented residencies. But I leave the floor to Alan, who will give you more information on this second i-Portunus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fanny, for this introduction. And I will not say anything further because I think it's a very nice transition that Alan takes over the words and says everything he knows about the current open calls of i-Portunus. Thank you, Alan.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm very happy to that we are organizing this seminar. And as Fanny already pointed out, it's really the idea to actively try to provide as much as detailed information about the current open calls of i-Portunus. So I will immediately start with that. Yeah, I think Fanny already mentioned how i-Portunus came into being. I think the important to mention is that currently it's a consortium who is organizing i-Portunus, so it's still supported, of course, by the European Commission and the Creative Europe program, and then it's co-funded and organized by a consortium existing out of Goethe Institute, Institut Français en Isolatia. What is important is that I always start my explanation a little bit with two elements that I try to explain what i-Portunus stands for. So first of all, it is a mobility scheme. It is a supporting structure that is really focusing on artists, on individuals also in this case. So in the current pilot project that we are working in right now, it is we are focusing on artists, creators, and cultural professionals. So I always underline that because it also means that you apply as an individual, which is a bit of a difference than if you have the ability to apply as a host organization. So it's really taught from an individual perspective. You can also apply as a group until 5 members of that group, but even if you apply as a group, you still have, yeah, it's still one project manager, one individual who should write the application. That's the first element that we always try to focus on. And then the second element, which I think is also important to mention, is that this is a demand-driven mobility scheme. So basically, it's a scheme that we try to provide really a lot of flexibility in terms of with which kind of international mobility project you apply, which form this can take. So that said, it also means that we don't provide a script of the ideal situation that you can apply with, but we work with these 3 objectives that were already initially mentioned by Fanny. And these objectives, they are professional development, international collaboration, and production-oriented residencies. And the interesting thing is there that you can actually sketch your projects. You have to argument how you would like to fulfill one of these objectives. So it's always the most important one. Yeah, you can go ahead. You can do the following about. So this is already explained by Fanny. So there was the on the move. Originally, there was the operational study of on the move, which played an important role actually to identify also the needs in the specific sectors, the needs also for what kind of mobility scheme needed to be implemented. So as well as the first, that's actually also the second pilot program of i-Portunus is based upon these findings. You can still, through these links, you can still find them online. They're also archived on the current i-Portunus website, so you can always have a look at it. And can you bring the following, please, the following slide? Because yeah, I'm just briefly going to focus on this. So as I said, this program, it is initiated by the Creative Europe program, which basically means that all countries that are participating in the Creative Europe program are eligible to apply for this fund. So it basically means that you have to be over 18. You have to be a legal resident of one of these Creative Europe countries, and the travel or the mobility that you apply for should be cross country. So it should really go into another country. And it should also be one of these what we call Creative Europe countries. You can see the list here. I think what is important to mention is that it also includes the overseas countries and territories. And what is important to mention also is that it's still, in this case, eligible to participate or to apply if you're coming from the United Kingdom, if you're going to the United Kingdom. Of course, this is since January, it's different for the overall Creative Europe program, but in case of this specific pilot program, there is still eligibility for artists, creators, and cultural professionals from the United Kingdom to apply for this fund. Can we go to the following slide, please? So yeah, initially, yeah, with the initial phase, you saw the numbers already. In that time, there was this focus on the performing arts and the visual arts. I think what is important and what we also kept for the second pilot phase of i-Portunus is that is this individual approach, and there's also again this demand-driven mobility scheme, which actually had its first sort of format in that time. Can you go to the following slide, please? Now we are in the second phase. As we said before, we have 5 open calls currently. These are opened up in 3 different periods. So we first launched the first 2 open calls in December. These were the ones for literary translation and music. These are separate open calls. So you either choose to apply for within music, or you apply for literary translation. Then 15th of January, we opened the open call for architecture, and 15th of February, there will be the final launch of the open calls. Again, an open call for music and an open call for cultural heritage. Can you go to the following slide, please? So here you can see the dates. Every one of these open calls is opened for 2 months. So yeah, that's the ideal situation to apply. Then it takes about 1 month to do the selection procedure, etc. And then, yeah, for example, the first open calls for literary translation and music would be for mobility starting from the 1st of June and going till the 30th of November 2021. So this is actually the period that you can actually apply for and where the activities can take place. Can you go to the following slides? In terms of budgets, what is important to say is that there is in the fund overall 500,000 euros. We hope that we can support about 200 applications with that budget. Of course, that also depends on the amount of applications and the amount of grants that are asked for, because this is actually a difference with the initial i-Portunus program, is that the grant now actually exists out of 2 lump sums. So these are not detailed numbers, but these are lump sums. They one for transport, which is 350 euros, and then there is a second part that exists out of per diems. These per diems, these depend on where you travel to. So we identified 3 groups of countries that are a little bit cheaper to travel or to stay, and ones that are a bit more expensive. So we made a differentiation to apply to calculate the per diem differently. So it depends on destination, and of course it also depends on duration. In this open calls, and so in that sense also all the open calls are similar. So for every open call it is possible to apply for a mobility period between 7 and 60 days. So which allows really for a big scope, big gamma actually of possibilities to work internationally. Yeah, and then of course I have to mention as well, so these 2 sums, they are brought together through an automatic calculation through the application form. This is the final grant that you can apply for, so you don't have to do that yourself. So within the application, this automatically is calculated when you fill in the destination and the period. And for group applications, this, of course, the grant is actually the amount per person. We do foresee, it's also important to mention, a maximum of 3,000 euro per person. So within the current i-Portunus, you can apply, there is no minimum, so you can apply for as little as you like, but you have to start, of course, with a mobility of at least 7 days. And then the maximum amount is these 3,000 euros. Can I see the following slide, please? Exactly. So here they are, the first calls. There is an i-Portunus call for literary translation. that was launched the 9th of December, and where the deadline is the 28th of February. So also, as I said before, all the open calls, so the 5 different open calls, are actually not that different. They only differ because they focus on specific sectors. So there is a bit of a difference in the objectives, or in the way that you would fill in these objectives, but then the main thematic of the objectives stay the same. So each time it's about, you can choose between professional development, international collaboration, or production-oriented residency. But then, for instance, in the case of literary translation, it would be, for example, if it's about international collaboration, it might be, this is an example of a situation that you might need to travel in order to have an exchange with the writer that you will be translating, or in order to learn to know specifics of a certain language that you're working with, or things like that. So it's kind of an immersion, for example, would be a good example of doing such an mobility. In case also of literary translation and also for music, these open calls, they are open for the practitioners and open for the creators. Basically means literary translation, it's only open for literary translators. The interpretation of what literature is very broad. So that's very flexible. But it's really focusing on the on the people who actually make the translation. So, for example, it's not open to writers. In the case of music, it is open for musicians, composers, and singers. So actually also to the practitioners of music. So basically that means that if you, for instance, are a festival organizer, unfortunately, this open call would not be possible to apply for. So there is a difference. For the open calls of architecture and cultural heritage, we do include the possibility for cultural professionals to apply. So also there, it really depends a little bit on the specifics also of the sector. Also a little bit based on the research that identified also the biggest needs. For example, in the case of music, we're focusing on music itself, of course, but we in the open call, it says preferably for jazz, traditional music, and classical music. It includes the possibility to apply with other formats of music. It's not that the genres are extremely specified or that there is that they are very well defined, but it is important to focus on these genres because of the research, these were also the ones that were needed this support the most. Then on the other hand, but yeah, again, there is also a certain sense of flexibility. Again, this is this demand-driven story. It's really also, and again, it's still a pilot program, so it's really also figuring out where are the needs, how can, and also how will this support be used. So this is also an important thing to mention. Can I go to the following slide? So here there is a bit of a breakdown of the timing. I will explain a little bit of the different steps. So the call for application, that's already done. Then the deadline would be the 28th of February. Notification of results would be the 2nd of April, 2021. This is the selection procedure. So what happens after you applied with your dossier? So you sent in your dossier, and then there are 2 evaluators who actually evaluate the application. They read through the application and they evaluate how the mobility is worked with in your application. It's important to say that actually the evaluation is not evaluating your project entirely. Of course, the more information you provide there, the better, and the more preparation you can show, for instance, the better. But on the other hand, it's really the element of mobility that is important. For instance, there is the focus on how necessary is the mobility. There is a focus on the feasibility of the mobility and elements like that. So these are actually the questions that are asked through the evaluation. What happens then is that two evaluators provide their evaluation, and it's the common between these two evaluations that will be the final evaluation. And then afterwards there is the selection. You will be notified, and then as I said before, the earliest date of departure is the 1st of June, because then once that you are selected, there is the moment of also signing a contract, going in for there, really preparing, and then the mobility is possible between the 1st of June and 30th of November. It's a good moment, I think, also to tell a little bit about the current situation that we are in, because this is a mobility project, and we are in a COVID-19 situation that is highly complicated. We are aware of that with i-Portunus also. What we provide in terms of that is if there are difficulties in terms of traveling related to COVID-19, then there is a higher amount of flexibility that can be provided. So there is the possibility to postpone the mobility. So if you apply with a certain project, and by the time that you are supposed to travel, hopefully a bit before, you see like, okay, this is going to be highly complicated to do so, then there is a possibility to postpone the mobility. You should keep then the same amount of days of the mobility you applied for initially. And this still has to happen before the 30th of November. But other than that, there is a higher amount of flexibility there. There is also the possibility to change destination, because we also saw that sometimes that makes a difference as well, specifically with bigger countries. If you, for instance, can travel to another city or things like that, that might make a difference. If you change destination, it should be within the same group of countries. Yeah, that's an important, well, that's the only requirement, basically. And you could do this until 10 days before you actually travel. And then a third way, if all of that doesn't work, there is the possibility to provide an alternative, and to provide an alternative towards your initial plans that you applied with. And then it could also include forms of blended mobility and virtual mobility. So this is a bit also to give you an idea about how to deal with the current COVID-19 situation. Of course, we hope that this might not be necessary, and that everybody can basically ideally do the travels and do the mobility as they thought about initially. Can I have the following slide, please? So I think, yeah, I think we can go on, because I explained all of this already. Yes, this is to briefly mention. So the whole application procedure happens digitally. If you are interested to send in an application, you can go either to the website i-Portunus.eu, where you will find on the home page an Apply Now button, and you could easily go there. This Apply Now button will bring you to my-i-Portunus.eu, and the my-i-Portunus.eu is actually the platform. It's you have to create an account there. You log in with this account, and this platform is important for you through all the whole process. First of all, it's important because it provides the access to the digital application. You fill in the digital application. As said before, it's a very straightforward application form. A lot of that was also feedback that we got from the first i-Portunus, is that the biggest group of people who applied didn't spend only a couple of hours to the application. So we really tried to keep that and to make it as accessible as possible. of course, you do need to provide some details, so you have the possibility to explain your project. It also includes the possibility, yeah, well, of course, you have to talk about your mobility. So you choose the destinations you want to travel to. There, that said, it's important to mention that you can either do a segmented mobility, or you can do a continuous mobility. Continuous mobility, that's what we call one travel is. So you start and you might go to 1, 2, or 3, maximum 5 destinations that you can identify. Make sure though that with these 5 destinations, there is a limitation in that sense that you have to stay at least 5 days in one destination. So there is a bit of time that you need to take care of in your work plan. That's a continuous travel. There is segmented travel. Segmented travel, it means that you can go in and forth. You can also say like, okay, I travel to one destination, then I come back, I travel to another destination, I come back. In that case, this is important to mention. Of course, the grant that we foresee only includes this 350 euros for transport. So it's not that if you would fill in segmented mobility that you have 2 or 3 times 350 euros. So that budget stays the same. Again, as I said, it's a lump sum. So it can be either way you could work with it. What else do I have to say about the application? The application needs to be in English. That's can be important to mention. The application also needs to be sent in by an individual. As I said, the first element about i-Portunus, it's really this support of artists individually. So it means that, for example, if you are a host organization, I mean, the role of a host organization is very important because they are often at the other end of the mobility. So somebody applies with a project, for example, a residency in Rome, then there is the host organization. And then the role that the host organization can play is important because they can send an invitation letter, they can send a confirmation, they can send even a contract if there is one, and if they are happy to share that. This can all be attached to the application form, and it's also important for the evaluators to show that it's well prepared, that there is already this discussion going on, and that you actually have concrete plans to fulfill. That said, what the host organization cannot do is apply themselves. So, for example, if you are a host organization and you're interested in i-Portunus to invite an artist, for example, it's still the artist, him or herself, that has to apply. So the host organizations themselves, they cannot do so. Maybe the following slide. Yes, so as I said, it's a simple and easy application form. The budget, yeah, then there's also a sense of an activity report. That's for those who are selected, who fulfill the mobility. We ask to send in an activity report. This activity report is also pretty straightforward. Again, it's a narrative. You have to provide, of course, proofs of your mobility, flight tickets, etc., and also images. Yeah, once that you start to do the mobility, it's always interesting to document and to provide information about that. Can you have the following slide? Okay, so I think that's it. Here you can see also the email address. You can any question that you have about anything concerning your application, you can send to this email address. It's either me or my colleague who will answer this properly. So yeah, and I always say that you can easily write it down, and don't hesitate if you have any questions also to ask them quickly, because it might improve also your application. And that's it, I think. I think as an introduction is a good start. And of course, I'm looking forward to the Q&A as well, and also to the other presentations of the artists that are now coming to listen myself. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alan. I think it was very informative, and we already received quite a lot of questions. So I hope we'll be able, during the 30 minutes that we have planned for Q&A to answer at least most of them. As I already mentioned in the Q&A, maybe it is good to know, it's good to mention it here as well. Please, in this webinar, we are focusing mainly on the current open calls, which are for music and literary translation. I mean, the two open calls that are with the most recent deadlines. And we will have two separate webinars focused on architecture and cultural heritage. So if time permits, for all of your questions around cultural heritage and architecture, we will try to answer them. But if we do not have time, then please wait and join us for the next i-Portunus, or you can contact Alan, as he mentioned, or his colleague directly to get an answer to your questions. I will now say a few words about the Transartist database and actually how we came to collaborate with i-Portunus, because in 2019, a lot of mobility that involved also artists going to residencies. And I will share my screen now. Just a second. So Transartist has the largest database of artists in residencies in the world, with a current number of 1,423, and more than half of these residencies are located in Europe. In this section of our website, you can find the residency, and you can filter by region, by country, or by discipline. Since, as I mentioned, the focus is on music and architecture, for example, if you filter by music, you can see all the residencies that we have listed for which you can apply. We are currently actively busy on updating this part of our database, and it might happen when you scroll to the database that some information is out of date. But at least you can always contact us, or you can find the contact details from the residency in the profile of that residency. So contact them directly to see if some of the information are still relevant. But as I said, we are actively working on the updates, and we hope in the next month, 2 months, to be complete. So you can scroll through the database and look for an inspiration. I think what we mentioned for the last open call, there were artists that used their budget or part of their budget from i-Portunus to go to a residency. We were thinking what would be a good way to connect this residency with the project, and what we did, we created a tag for our website, for the Transartist website. It's called i-Portunus. And then if you go by that, you will see all the residencies that the artist chose to be part of in the past open call of i-Portunus. And for example, I will just open one residency as an example, which is the art colony in Lithuania, and unfortunately I do not have the example here that I want to show you, but I believe that here we have, yes. Because, as Alan already mentioned, residency or organizers cannot apply for this funding. This fund is strict for artists, for individuals. So we do not want to separate this residency from the others in a sense, as they are different from the other residencies, and that you should only apply to these places. But what we wanted to do is to show what kind of project has been done in this residency with the support of i-Portunus. For most of these places, you can find the artists that was, you see the artist that was in this residency, and on the opportunity you can read more about their project. So I cannot stress enough the importance to use this part as an inspiration. So the residencies that were part of the program 2 years ago, but please use the complete database, because there are so many different possibilities to see what actually would be the best fit for your project to apply. And residencies are just one part for we can use the budget, as Alan already gave far more detailed explanation. What I want to say, and with this I will conclude my short and quick presentation, is that on 17th of February, so in 2 weeks, we are having our second webinar. And I will be joined in this webinar by Marie Lesour from On the Move. There is, and also from a representative from Izolacija. That is one of the consortium partners in this project. And we will try to present different options for you as artists, as cultural professionals, where you can apply and what to inspire you more to find ways how to connect your project with certain either organizations or festivals, etc. As well as the representative from Izolacija will be able to answer more concretely the questions around the application procedure in i-Portunus. So thank you very much for this attention. I will now stop sharing the screen, and as you've seen in our program, we also have 2 artists that participated that received the funding 2 years ago from i-Portunus. So we invited Luka Knežević-Strika to say a few words about his project and his experience working abroad, and as well Paul Gunon. And Paul, I'm already apologizing if I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly. So first I would like to give the word to Luka, and so we can hear more about what he did in 2019.
I had to mute myself. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's nice to see you. I was just thinking about how this project and we did. It was together with me and Jelena Mijić, who couldn't be here today, unfortunately. But it seems like it was in another world, or at least another timeline. I mean, I'm starting with this because it also in ways affected some of the later outcomes of this project, because our idea behind applying was that Kosovo and Albania, where we traveled with the project, are very close to where we are, but there is not a lot of connections. Actually, with Kosovo, which is in, as you might know, complicated situation with Serbia, there is much more connections between Belgrade and Pristina, especially. But Albania, that has always been very close, is somehow remote. And I've known very few people and artists from there, and we were wanting to basically exchange, meet, and create connections that would later turn into cooperations by traveling there. That being said, I will also share my my screen now to show you some photos. Can you see correctly? I hope yes. So I will just be showing some of the photos, because also a bit of background, both Jelena and me are multimedia artists, but have photographic, documentary photography practice, and are part of a photo collective, Belgrade Raw, based in Belgrade, dealing with the basically urban life in Belgrade, and trying to explore the city through photography. So we had already, as I mentioned, connections in and people we knew in Pristina and Prizren, and we started from there. And we moved on to Albania next. So it is a very rich scene, and in many ways similar to Serbia, but somehow the experiences and ways of organizing that we share have been very, very interesting, actually, to share with them. So we were basically offering our experiences in organizing as independent cultural scene in Serbia, and creating a wider networks organizations to try and create better opportunities to work in the field of culture. And we met with a series of actors. I will mention most of them, hopefully. In Pristina, we have visited the project space 17. And actually, this is one of the cooperations that started to continue after our project in early 2020. They were visiting this self-organized and self-governed cultural center in Belgrade, Magazine, and exchanging our ways of working and opportunities to work in such an informal way and build up on and learn about self-organization, basically. We were also met with people from Kino Armata, which is an example of one of those successful examples in Kosovo of like collaboration between independent civic organizations and institutions, which is also another example is Kino Lombardi from Prizren. So we were there. It's a cinema. We were also in a community-run center, Thermokis. And in Peć we met with Vulnet and colleagues from Anibar Festival, which is an animation festival in Peja. And it was kind of with every person we met, we were basically focused on creating future collaboration and exchanging and getting to know the scene. But we're also interested in basically the culture of memory and politics of the culture of memory. So these were our focuses, and basically with everyone we met, we learned a lot and were kind of figuring out ways to continue to collaborate. But I think this part of the project ended up, if not failed in a way, but then suspended, because most of the planned collaboration and informal or more organized visits have become impossible for the time. And I mean, with enough organization behind, of course, it is possible to travel and to do things. But in this informal way and starting out and new informal actors, the idea was to have it happen organically. And what is organic, I think, has changed for all of us. I think the takeaway behind this is there are seeds for connections, and there have been some online contacts we've had in the meantime, but several, for example, exhibitions that we were talking about of this Belgrade Raw Collective that were supposed to happen, one in Pristina, another one in Tirana, have basically somehow stopped. And I can understand, of course, that the other side of this conversation, because also in Serbia, we have been very focused on trying to influence our government to offer any sort of support and help to artists during the worst times of the pandemic, and we're pretty, us who were involved in this were pretty consumed by dealing with this and by daily lives and figuring out how to basically make it possible to sustain ourselves. We do not have any big conclusions about this. I have personally still feel effects of having an increased interest in the basically history of the region and the relations between the peoples in the region. And I have been recently, for example, started the practice of exploring 100 years ago on the day major Serbian daily newspaper Politika. And it is for me really interesting how already then you could see the seeds of ways and attitudes that in Serbia the Albanian people have been represented and dealt with at the level of the state and the nation. And these are topics that are still interesting to me, but haven't materialized in concrete works. I'm actually looking forward to hopefully this year of the pandemic subsiding, making it possible to basically continue connecting the ways we were before. And I hope that, yeah, I will meet many more people from the region and from these two countries and collaborate with them. I forgot to mention, actually, there was another interesting direct collaboration that came out of this experience. Areš Porta from Prizren, who is involved with Kino Lombardi, was actually part of the artistic residency that Jelena and me were organizing in Madeira, in the Portuguese island. So he was the only person from Kosovo there, and it has to do with our experience in this residency. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and I think I'm about my my time.
Thank you, Luca, very much for this interesting presentation and for sharing your experience and telling us more about your project. Too bad Jelena could not join us, but hopefully next time. And now I would like to give the words to Paul.
Hello everyone. So my name is Paul, and I am an artist, and my work deal with history, and it links between with society and politics. So with the i-Portunus grant, I could go to Skopje in North Macedonia to produce a solo show with the Akantis Gallery. So it was very great to have this grant, because I wanted to go to North Macedonia since many years, but there was no international connection between the two countries for art, no residency. So with the grant and the gallery, we can create a new residency and build a studio to produce an exhibition. And I was very interested of Skopje and its history, and particularly in a very controversial and unfinished architectural and sculptural project, which named Skopje 2014. In the 60s, Skopje lost its history because of a very strong earthquake. And in 2014, the government wanted to recreate one new history inspired from Greek Macedonia. And this created tension between the two countries. And I was very interested in this question of history and how we can rewrite it when we lose it. So, and it was a very great experience to can work in another country with another culture and new tools. And with this grant, we can make an exhibition with a big concrete sculpture, photographies, and I also can shoot a video. And during all the travel, we could work in relation with the French Institute. And they help us to make this project, to meet the people, and to produce exhibition catalog. And they also help us to continue this project after the residency. We can show a part of the exhibition in art video festival in Nice, in France. And it was very interesting to create this relation with the country and to build the project and to be able to show it in another country, in France, and go faster than just go in the country. So I don't know if you have some question or.
Thank you very much, Paul. While you were talking, I was trying to scroll down through the questions, and we actually have a lot of questions. Yeah. So I will try and read them. Especially, I will try to combine a few questions if possible. So maybe I will start from the top, and let's see. For example, I think this could be an interesting question for many of the participants. What is meant with a demand-driven mobility scheme? And I believe either Fanny or will be able to. Sorry, Paul, I'm not sure that this question is meant for you. I think it's more meant for Alan or Fanny. So what is meant with a demand-driven mobility scheme?
I can answer that. It's really when there was the operational study and the research, and maybe also Fanny can tell maybe a bit more of that because she, of course, was there. I only am working now on the second one, of course. But what came out, what was one of the things that came out of the operational study was that there is mobility support. but demand-driven mobility support was scarce. Demand-driven, it means that actually the artist provides the project that could be supported. So it's more based on the idea that instead of as a funder, you say like, okay, this is the project that is eligible. You say like, you provide the project and we provide elements. This is the best way that I can explain it. And this is also what we do now in the application form. That's why these objectives are identified. Instead of saying like, in this project, you have to do this and this and this, it's more like, tell us why your project is important. For example, for how do you deal with professional development, for instance, and what's the role of the mobility and why does the mobility need to be supported? So it's a bit the other way around. The idea there is that basically the initiative comes from the person who applies. So I think that's the best way that I can explain this demand driven. I don't know,
Yes.
Fanny, if you want to tell something.
Yeah, maybe just to add, because you've said the most important, but just to add that there are many calls for application, and when you have a call for application, you have a framework. Sometimes you have even you can have a theme, like you need to work on a special topic to answer to the call for application. So with this scheme, we wanted to answer to the artists the other way and let them propose their own project. So yes, easy. And most of the support for mobilities are coming from call for applications. So this is why we wanted to see the scheme in another way, in the perspective, from the point of view of the artists.
Thank you. And I'm just going to jump from one question to the next one. Are there exceptions from the fixed lump sum foreseen for the transportation costs of participants coming from or going to the overseas countries and territories? Should I repeat it? Or?
Sorry, if I understood correctly, it's a question about if you are coming from an overseas country, if there is an adjustment in the transport budget.
Yes.
Is that the question? Actually, the thing is that by making this calculation, it's really focusing on a transparency towards how the grant is actually calculated. In the end, what happens is that in the contract, you will have the total sum of the grant. And of course, if there is more money spent, for instance, on transport, then it's not something that will be taken into account, that you can only spend 350 euro, for instance. So also the same with the per diems. The per diems, it's a lump sum. It's the amount of days, of course, how long you are abroad, the overnight stays that are taken into account, and the destination. But there again, it's not that you have to concretely provide, once that you are selected in detail, where did you spend that money on. So in that sense, that's why we are talking about the lump sum. If we talk about the activity report, also there we really tried our best to keep that as easy and easygoing as possible. So there also the focus lies on, of course, you need to provide a proof that actually mobility took place, so a flight ticket, etc. But then the biggest part is actually more providing imagery and a small narrative about how the mobility went and what the experience was like. So I think if that is a good answer.
Thank you. A question that I already received a few times is when will the information be out for the cultural heritage deadline?
So it will be the 15th of February. We launch the 2 open calls, and these open calls will be open for 2 months. So their deadline is the 15th of April. Mainly, so from the information that I gave now, so the biggest part of the information will be the same. So also there is a possibility to apply for a mobility between 7 and 60 days. Also there, these are the same objectives that you can identify. A difference with, for instance, cultural heritage is that that one will be also open to cultural professionals, because they're seeing the specifics of the sector as well. It's more focusing on creators, cultural professionals, and people who are active in cultural heritage itself. But that's the timing. So deadline would be 15th of April. And so, yeah, you can inscribe to the newsletter if you really want to be up to date, or follow the social media or the website. We will start to make announcements next week, and then next week, Monday, it will be uploaded.
The next question is, if somebody who is working, for example, as a performer and cultural professional, whether they can apply for multiple i-Portunus opportunities, for example, for music as a composer, or for heritage as a producer.
Technically, you can. So it is, at this point, it is possible to apply with different projects or in different open calls. What I always mention, and what I think it's important to mention, is that of course there is a difference in the evaluation. So for example, an evaluator, that has a, so the fact that we have 5 open calls in 4 different sectors, of course, the evaluators, they are specialized in every specific sector. So for instance, if you would apply for music, of course, the evaluator will be really looking at it from the perspective of their own sector. So I think that's, you always have to take into account, if you do these multiple applications, that you have to make sure that, that you know that these evaluations will be different. I had some questions before about this, and sometimes it's also really a matter of making the right choice. Sometimes I also tell that it's best really to focus on where do you see your project the most, where does it fit the best, and that should be the application. And ideally you would focus on that instead of sending 2 or 3 applications. But technically it's definitely possible.
Is the open call for music in February and the one in April the same, or does the second one has to be connected to cultural heritage?
No, so for the moment that is the same. So actually, if you look at the open call for music now, it will be the same as the one there. So in a way, in terms of music, there is really the possibility to continue to apply till the 15th of April. And so it's the same requirements, as the one that is published now.
Can you give examples or an example of alternative ways of mobility, digital or other, which you may consider eligible?
So what will happen is if you fill in, I will just tell a little bit about the whole procedure in order to understand what we need there. So what happens is, if you apply now, you apply with your ideal project. So you basically say like, okay, this is where I want to travel to for this and this reason. This is the partner that I'm talking to, or this is the person I will collaborate with, etc. This is the project that you apply with, that also goes through the selection procedure. Then at a later stage, if it's not manageable to do this travel, you have 3 options. Well, 3 options. I mean, there are many options, but you have 3 ways that you can deal with other ways of flexibility. So first, you can try to postpone the residency if there is not the possibility to travel at that moment, or it's not safe. Secondly, you can change destination. And thirdly, you can either go for a format of blended mobility. Blended mobility would be that you still travel one part, but that you, for instance, say that another part would be more virtually organized, and then the mobility would be smaller. Or it's full virtual mobility would be an option too. But there, in both of these situations, we really ask to provide an alternative plan. Well, an alternative plan is a big word, so there will be a document that you have to fill in. There will be specific questions that you have to tell us, how this will be. Because, for instance, in terms of virtual mobility, it's only eligible when actually the objective that you put in the application form, when you are still maintaining that objective. So you'll have to argument how you will do that. You still have to give some sort of proof that there was a sense of international collaboration, and there has to be also the argumentation that there will be an extra qualitative element towards your towards your artistic development that comes out of this experience. So also there are, these are not limitations, but it's more like, this is the way that it should be formed. And then of course there will be a difference in the activity report, in the documents that you need to provide, and there will be a shift more towards a work plan, for instance, towards meetings. Also, we might work with screenshots of actual meetings and things like that in order to provide ideally this possibility.
Thank you, Alan. I read already a few questions that are expressing their concerns with COVID-19, and I think this one question kind of summarizes the others, is that whether the approved projects will be allowed to be postponed beyond November 30 in case travel and mobility is still restricted.
Sorry, so the question is if you can go beyond 30th of November, or?
Exactly. For the projects that got the funding, will there be a possibility in case people still cannot travel?
No, so at the moment, this is one of the, so as I said, we try to be very flexible, but this is one of the limitations that are there, and that's also because of the fact is we may not forget it's still a pilot project, so there is a limited amount of time. It's a grant, and so in that sense it means the 30th of November is really the final date that we could get things organized for return. After that, there's not enough time to include it in this project. That said, of course, and I mean, maybe I give a little bit more information about the overall procedure of i-Portunus, because at this point we are still in the pilot phase. It means it's a phase of experimentation. It basically means that we are trying things out still, that we are working with limited budget still. We are working with limited time as well. So this whole project, it takes 1 year, which is very small. But based on the experiences that we're organizing now, i-Portunus anyway will also continue within the structural, in a more structural format within the Creative Europe program. And for in the future perspective of i-Portunus, these things will look differently. So then they are talking about might be a longer period of time anyway, will be more stabilized, and then things of timing will also be very different. So of course we don't know yet how that will look like, but these are one of the elements that are taken into account for its future development. But at this moment, it's really the 30th of November. That should be the time of return.
And we are all hoping that the deadline still stays and that we can travel and do everything we have planned, right? Next question. If you apply for mobility for this funding, can your project be research?
Can your project be research? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're, I mean, that's a possibility. The only thing that you have to see, so because then the objective would be more professional development, for example, could be, you could choose for professional development, but there you have to make sure that if it's about, for example, if it's connected to a PhD or something like that, you have to make sure that it's outside of regular educational forms. So it's really the professional development can be used for workshops, for master classes, for anything, but not for a regular educational activities. So there is one limitation, but other than that, no, for sure. Also, to tell a little bit about the selection, as I said, it's really about the mobility of the project, of course, but also there is a look at the results, but it's not so that i-Portunus, that the grant only is for if there is the tangible result, it's less important than, for instance, the necessity of the mobility or the feasibility or the preparation you put in there. So there will be a difference in evaluation there. So anyway, the result is not, it is important, but it's not that important. So we definitely accept projects that are more focusing on development or research or things like that. Specifically also in cultural heritage, that might be the exchange of knowledge, for instance, might be an important one there as well.
Is there an age limit for the application?
You have to be over 18, but other than that, you there is no maximum limit. It's both open for, that's also asked in the application form, it's both open for established artists, creators, cultural professionals, and emerging. If I remember, but well, Fanny can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in her presentation it also said that last time 70% were emerging artists. Of course, that's also what, yeah, we don't know what will be the case now, but yeah, of course, there is also a lot of attention for emerging artists, but nevertheless, it's open to all ages.
This is also a question that I already saw a few times. Apologies. Could mobility be understood within the same country of residence if the project requires traveling to other cities that are more than 1,000 kilometers away?
No, so yeah, I mean, no, it's really, it supports cross-border mobility. So even if you are in a very big country, unfortunately, you have to cross one border or another to be eligible for support by i-Portunus.
If a group is composed by 7 people, how does it work? Is it possible to apply as 5-people group and look for some other supports for the last 2 members?
For example, so that would be a good solution. The whole idea, i-Portunus co-supports, it's partly supports. Of course, if you only apply as 1 person, you might have a bigger chance that this might really cover the costs. But of course, but the project is perfectly eligible. So even if you are a group of 7 people, there is a maximum of 5 people who can apply for funding, but it does not mean that you cannot apply with the project. So you can apply with bigger groups, but then, yeah, unfortunately, only maximum 5 people will be supported after selection. And then for the other, you might have to look for other possibilities.
Thank you. Question about literary translation. Do the translators need a contract from a publishing company for when applying for i-Portunus, or whether it can be a freelance project?
Both. It can be an own initiative, of course. So how can I best answer this? Overall, I think this is not only for literary translation, but overall for including all the open calls. You have the possibility to send additional documents with your application form. And these documents, these are actually proofs of your preparation. So these could be invitation letters of host. These could be letters by people who are connected to the project, who are interested to do this international collaboration, etc. So this really shows how well prepared you are and how feasible and realistic the mobility is. For literary translation specifically, of course, if there would be a contract of a publisher, that is definitely very good. If not, there might be other possibilities that you can send in order to prove that your mobility is well prepared. For example, if you go to residency for translators, you could ask a letter from the host organization. It's not only limited to organizations. You can also identify a person that is a host. That's a possibility as well. What is not possible in terms of group applications, for example, is that one of the members is the host. So just to keep that in mind, that is not possible.
And while we are talking about group application, there is one interesting question. Could a group also include family members? For example, if there is a newborn child, can this be included?
If sorry, I don't. But is this child participating or not?
I wouldn't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's we don't. I mean, yeah, we also always have to clearly make a difference between, of course, what the host organization needs and so there we cannot tell. So we are the fund, of course, in terms of the fund. If you apply with a group application, then the members should be artists or people that, included that you need in order to organize the project, and in order and that would also do the same mobility as you do. So and also again, if you're talking about children, unfortunately, anyway, you have to be over 18 in order to apply for i-Portunus. But of course, so this is really out of my head. We didn't get to this question yet. It's a very interesting one. Family members, I don't think that they can be supported, for instance, unless when they would be really actively part of the project somehow. That would be my answer for the moment. I can look deeper into that. If this person sends a message to info@i-Portunus, we can have a closer look at that if that's necessary.
And to this, I can add another question about how is the accounting of the spent money will be proceeded later on in the report. So part of accommodation and transport, what else could be declared?
Basically, I mean, these, so what for us is important for the activity report is that there is a proof that the actual mobility took place. So in that sense, it's important to get the proofs of transport and some proof that's, amount of period that you were there more or less. And then anything else that you can provide, sure. I mean, you can provide as many costs as you like. As I said before, it's not necessary to provide proofs of the entire cost of the grant. So it's really, we need proofs in terms of that the actual mobility took place, but it's not that you have to find proofs until the last euro. But of course, the more proof, the better.
And now I have a question from Facebook, because we also allowed participants to ask questions there. It's addressed to both of you, to Alan and Fanny. If you could explain in more detail the demands or the requirements for an individual artist to be considered eligible as a host. So that the artist can be eligible as a host.
I don't know, Fanny, if you...
What I understand is that, for example, it can be a cooperation between two artists. One is applying and is doing the mobility to another country. And there, in this other country, there is another artist who will collaborate to the project. So this is possible. I mean, the host organization doesn't need to be like a cultural organization. It can also be another artist who is going to collaborate with the applicant. I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Yes, I think you are, which I guess with this you're also answering another question I have, is that if you collaborate with a professional, can you add this person in the project budget?
Sorry, I didn't understand that question. Can you repeat?
So if you, as an artist, are going somewhere and you will collaborate with an individual, with a local professional, can you include some of the costs in the budget as well for this person?
Well, as I said, the grant is it's lump sum. So informally, in a way, you could do that. What you cannot do is that, of course, if you decide, for example, to write a group application and you want to include that person also to receive a grant, that's not possible. Because if you send a group application, then it's necessary that you both do the same project and that you both do the same mobility. So for example, I had questions like that before, that let's say there is somebody from Ireland and there is somebody from England, and they want to meet each other, and one person wants to go to Ireland for one part of the project, and then the other one comes to England for one part of the project. Then you cannot do that in one application. Then ideally you both send in an application, because the mobility is not the same. Or if you would both decide to meet each other in yet another location, for instance in I don't know, in France or something, then that would be a group application, for example, because then you do the same, then it's the same project, you do the same mobility, the same time that you're there, etc.
There's also a question: if there is a group of 6 people, can they make an application for 5 people and then the 6th person to make a separate application as an individual?
That's possible, but then again, there might be a difference in the evaluation, because of course, if you send in as a group, because it's important to mention that if you send in as a group, the CV that you sent in needs to represent the group. The artistic portfolio or the additional artistic information that you provide needs to represent the whole group. If you send in an individual application, what will be evaluated is your individual application. So then it would be your individual CV and your individual artistic activity. So there would be a shift. So if you would do so, again, it's possible. But yeah, it's not that, for example, yeah, it could happen that the group gets selected and the individual not, or the other way around, or I mean, that could happen because you have a difference in evaluation, of course.
Is it possible to submit an application for i-Portunus even though my nationality is Japanese and I live in EU? So.
Well, if you legally reside in a Creative Europe country, then you are eligible. So even if your nationality is American or Japanese in this case, that's not a problem, but you have to be legally residing. Yeah, so you will have to provide somehow that you legally live, that you have a legal address in one of the EU countries, well, Creative Europe countries.
And I believe the answer to this next question, you already mentioned it in the presentation, but just to make it clear for the participants, should all partners in the proposal be part of Creative Europe, or can they, for example, partner up with several European countries and then Korea and Mexico or similar?
Well, if you do that in your own project, of course, that's very interesting. Unfortunately, the support for i-Portunus does not until now reach that far. So only the people who are residing in a Creative Europe country and are traveling to a Creative Europe country are eligible. But for example, if you are a band and you have 5 members and 3 of these members apply to these Creative Europe countries, then these are eligible. If you have 2 additional members that are, for example, from Mexico or have to fly in from Mexico, for instance, unfortunately, that is not eligible. So in that case, only 3 people would be eligible for support.
Thank you. There was also a question about what kind of receipts should we provide in the reports from the hotel or from their expenses, from food. Should they collect these receipts?
Yeah, so that's a bit into the question we had before. So, of course, the more proofs that you can provide, the better. How it looks like concretely is that the activity report, so what I showed is my i-Portunus, where you create a login to apply. It's also the platform where you will send in the activity report afterwards. So again, that is a sort of form that you fill in, that you answer certain questions, and where you can attach documents. And then you have 5 documents that you can attach. And the more tickets you can provide, the better. What we essentially need is that there is a proof of your activity abroad and the duration. But then, yeah, would be very welcome if you can also provide further details. It's not ultimately necessary to provide all details for the full amount. So that's.
We are almost reaching the end with our time limit. I might choose 2 more, eventually 3 questions, depending on and then I think we will need to wrap up. Will the program be renewed in 2022?
Well, yes, but of course that's more a question for the European Commission and for the Creative Europe program and the people that organize that. But we know, I can already tell that there will be a structural further organization of i-Portunus. How that will look like, etc. That's we don't know the details of that, but it will continue. That's for sure.
For the project that the artists are applying, does it have to be authorial or they can apply to join another project?
I'm not sure if I understand that.
Whether they have to be the creators of the project or whether they can apply for the funding to go and join another project in a different country.
No, that's also eligible. Sure, if they, if you go to participate from another project or you're invited by another project or whatsoever, sure, that's also an eligible way of doing of applying. It's always interesting in that case that that you have an invitation or that there is that you add something like that, but you don't need to be the organizer of the project, and so you can do it like that as well.
And another question from the music sector: if somebody wants to apply by proposing a concert tour in 3 different states, do they all already have to provide contracts for those concerts?
Well, if they have those, yes, that would be very nice. But yeah, I mean, seeing the circumstances, that might be hard. So of course, if they have anything that is coming from, for example, if you have a concert hall and this concert hall has the initiative to work with you, it could also be a bit more broadly interpreted, and more it may also look like an intention of collaboration. For example, what is important is that there is some sort of document, that there is some sort of proof that this conversation already took place, that this is already more or less planned, and that this more or less will happen. I think that's an important one. Also, you have to make sure, if you're talking about tours, is that there is a limitation that you have to spend at least 5 days in every destination. So I think that's an important one in terms of music, to take that into account.
This will be the last question for today, is that although festivals cannot apply for i-Portunus, will the musicians be able, the ones who were invited by a festival, can they apply for i-Portunus?
Yes, of course. So it's just that the musician applies in his or her name. They're actually in the end also the ones who receive the grant. So that's the reason. As a festival, of course, you can help out with writing the application form. There is no problem with that, but just really make sure that you don't send it, and that you make sure that it's sent from the name of the one who will actually do the mobility, because otherwise that would not be eligible.
Great, thank you. First, well, what can I say? Thank you all. Thank you to all our attendees, and we actually got almost 100 questions. So, and Alan, I have to say that you and Fanny answered, from what I managed to keep track over here, around 42 questions. Some were overlapping. So thank you enormously for this effort and for this information. To say to our attendees, I chose, it was not an easy task, but I chose questions that would reflect the group. So there were some very specific questions for your own situation, and I would suggest, as Alan said, presented in his talk, to contact them directly, the coordinator from i-Portunus, and they can give you more detailed advice with this kind of personal and very specific questions. Once again, Alan, Fanny, Luca, Paul, thank you so much for participating today and for informing all of us for the project and for being so detailed in your answers. I believe some of our attendees were really, I'm sure you helped a lot in their further process for applying for i-Portunus. And I will conclude the day with again inviting you, especially the musicians and literary translation, for our next webinar on 17th of February. Very soon we will, I believe, beginning of next week, we will start promoting the event so that you can register. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you lots of luck in applying, and I wish that things will go back to normal, whatever that means, and that you will be able to realize your projects. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to meet you all soon in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.